Let me kick this off. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to our event on the Nazi Titanic. My name is Esther Kutash, and I'm the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. Our foundation promotes Holocaust education in the greater Philadelphia region. We do this by developing programs for teachers and students and by operating the Horvitz-Wasserman Holocaust Memorial Plaza that is located in Center City, Philadelphia, and which we opened to the public in October 2018. Tonight, you will hear from the author of the Nazi Titanic, Dr. Robert Watson, and Larry Platt, the co-founder and executive director of the Philadelphia Citizen. But first, I want to offer some thoughts on why I believe this event is particularly timely and important, and the brief conversation that you just witnessed between David and Robert just underscores that. According to the ADL's annual audit on anti-Semitic incidents, 2019 has had the highest number of anti-Semitic incidents ever recorded since ADL began tracking this data in the 1970s. With over 2,100 incidents, again, it's 2,100 incidents that have occurred this past year within every single state in our country, it is imperative that today, more than ever, we vigorously fight anti-Semitism, and we talk about this in a unified voice. As a director of a Holocaust education organization, I believe that a major part of this fight is teaching our communities about the universal lessons of the Holocaust. In his research, Dr. Watson has uncovered a fascinating untold story, shining new light on facets of the history that have laid dormant for well over 60 years. Holocaust education, both in its methodology and content, is an ever-evolving discipline. In fact, up until one of our board members told us about Dr. Watson and his book, we ourselves were unfamiliar with the story of this doomed ship. So I am as eager as all of you to hear more about our presenters and share a moment of reflection with you. Please use the Q&A function on Zoom to share your questions, and our presenters will address them at the end of this discussion. And with that, I would like to introduce our board chair, David Edelman, who will offer brief remarks.
Thank you, Esther. I too am excited to welcome Dr. Watson, author of the Nazi Titanic, and Larry Platt, my close friend of the Citizen. Dr. Watson's an award-winning author, educator, media commentator, who's published hundreds of scholarly articles and 40 books. He holds the title of Distinguished Professor of American History at Lynn University, where he also serves as the director of Project Civitas and senior fellow with the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship. Larry Platt is co-founder and executive director of the Philadelphia Citizen, a nonprofit, solutions-oriented media organization that seeks to defibrillate democracy in the American city where he was born. He's the former editor of the Philadelphia Magazine, Philadelphia Daily News, and author of the best-selling books Every Day I Fight and Life is Magic, My Inspiring Journey from Tragedy to Self-Discovery. Larry also served as a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer and has written for a variety of other nationally recognized media outlets. As board chair of the Holocaust Remembrance Foundation and a board member of the Citizen, I'm pleased to see these two organizations joining forces. With Larry's skill in getting to the heart of pressing social issues, you'll learn that Larry doesn't hold back, and Dr. Watson's unique expertise, I look forward to a truly excellent program this evening. Happy to welcome all of you this evening. And with that, Larry, I'll pass the microphone to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David, for your civic leadership, for the Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, which does tremendous work. And thank you, Esther, for all you've done to make the Holocaust Memorial a reality these last 5 years. I know it wasn't easy, and it's really a civic treasure now. I'm so psyched about this because when I was reading the Nazi Titanic, Dr. Watson, and we're going to get right to it, I found myself so jealous of you as an author myself. You found a story that none of us knew existed, and in an area where I thought there were no more news stories. Before we get to the actual narrative, how did you come up with the story of this ship, and how did you stumble upon it, and how did you research it after hearing about it. Can you give us
Thanks,
the
Larry.
background on that?
You got it. First off, David and Corey, Jennifer, Esther, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm delighted and honored, and to all of you for joining us. Thank you for supporting this memorial, this very worthy cause. As you heard mentioned at the outset, almost every major organization that tracks hate crimes and anti-Semitic, from microaggressions to violence to nonsense, the ADL, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Brennan Center, the Brandeis Center, Trinity College in Connecticut, the FBI, they've all been doing this for decades, and they've documented an unprecedented spike just starting about 4 years ago, and the numbers were doubling, and we're hitting an all-time high. So who would have thunk it? You know, a step forward, a step backwards. So now more than ever, I think organizations like this memorial are ever so important. You know, I always say, Larry, to my students, or if I'm talking at a Holocaust museum, you know, that for the words never forget, never again to really have resonance, we have to reteach every generation because there's backslide, as we're seeing now. And as a professor, and I taught at, I think, 9 schools. I moved around when I was younger and single. And I've been a visiting fellow at, I think, about a dozen. I've had what I consider to be the honor of being booed on college campuses by the BDS movement, by the Students for Justice in Palestine. And I've seen what they're doing on campuses. So this organization, this memorial, and programs like this are ever so important. So Larry, to your question, you know, I think every paleontologist dreams of putting a shovel in the ground to start a garden and pulling up a new dinosaur, right? I think every archaeologist dreams of tripping one day and there's a hole, they dig down the hole and there's a cave and there's an unknown city. Or, you know, as an historian, I think I found a couple of good stories in my career, but nothing like this. The other 40 books or so that I've written, nothing together, they pale in comparison to this. So what happened was, I've always said that, quite simply, there's more we don't know about history than we do know about history. Daniel Borston was the late, great Librarian of Congress. I was a big fan. And Borston had this law where he would say that 99% of all the books ever written are gone, decomposed, burned, lost. And if you think about paper or parchment 100, 500, 1,000 years ago, I mean, it wasn't chemically processed and treated like today. So if you take some of that and just set it outside, it's gone in a month, it's soil. Plus love letters, poems, recipes, and women's words were just seen as not a priority. So we've lost most everything. So there's more we don't know than we do know. I thought the exception was the Holocaust. This is the world's worst instance of genocide. And because it happened in the 20th century, we had some real-time perspectives through video, through the Nazis keeping meticulous records, through the Americans, the British, the Russians, whomever liberated, keeping records. But the Shoah, the oral histories, think of it this way, Larry, we've taped thousands of oral histories, which there's no other event in the world that we have such a mirror into or insight into. But yet, even though we've taped thousands, there's at least 6 million stories we haven't been able to tape. So, and all those are potentially new and profound insight. So what I wanted to do, Larry, I was going to write a book on the last week of World War II. I'm such a nerdy historian, guilty as charged. You know, and I made a list years ago. I wanted to write on all the big topics: Civil War, Revolution, George Washington, my hero, Harry Truman, the Holocaust, World War II. So I've been putting check marks in all the boxes. So I wanted to write a book about the last week of World War II in Europe. That was chaotic. The Germans weren't keeping records because they were too busy dying, committing suicide, or running. And that week was just as everybody's racing to Berlin. So I thought that what I would do is make each day in that, you know, from Hitler's suicide, April 30th in the bunker, you know, cyanide, bullet, burned in the garden, the trifecta, the hat trick, you know, from that up until VE Day, a couple days later. And I wanted to flesh out one story of love and one story of loss, because that's what really humanizes such a, you know, momentous event. Who can wrap our brains around the Holocaust of World War II? So with that said, I'm digging up stories of love and loss, and by dumb luck, I come across a letter from a major in the British Army. His name is Till. T-I-L-L. And Till writes that of all the horrors of World War II, nothing will compare to watching thousands and thousands of Holocaust survivors all die at the end of the war when we were signing a surrender. I got the letter and I went, what is this, right? I've never heard of this. So I called the Holocaust Museum. I called the World War II Museum in New Orleans. I emailed Yad Vashem. I emailed the Imperial War Museum in London. You know, and as an historian, you have contacts. And everybody goes, we don't know. No, this never happened. And I said, I'm pretty sure, you know, this letter looks legitimate. What I do for a living, Larry, and you said you were jealous of me, don't be, because here's my life. I spend all day in an archive reading 200-year-old letters. That's what I do for a living. So as my wife always tells me, I can't change the oil in the car, but if you have a really old letter, I'm your guy. And then, so I set the letter aside, continue with my research. I find a second letter, again, by dumb luck, needle in a haystack. It's by a general named Mills Roberts. He's a British general in charge of the 6th Commando. That's a special forces unit, like our Navy SEALs or an 82nd Airborne. And he was the one on the beach when everybody died. And I found his letter. So I said, I got 2 letters now. This had to have happened. So what I did was, you can find out if you, Larry, or if anybody has a loved one or a family member who was in the Holocaust or World War II, there's records available. There's tracing services. So I found out Major Till's unit and General Mills Roberts' unit, and I followed them the whole way through World War II. Were they at D-Day? Were they at the Battle of the Bulge? You know, and you have casualty counts. So I could follow the record. And then both the records vanished at the end of the war. So what's the likelihood that both military, were they abducted by aliens? You know, what's the likelihood? So I'm thinking, there's only one rational explanation. This thing really happened and the records are classified. So long story short, in London, their National Archives, like our National Archives, the Royal Archives, they had for 7 decades, you know, a box of hundreds of pages of classified top secret reports. And get this, Larry, it was marked not to be open until the year 2045, making it a 100-year secret. So that's how we just tripped across or stumbled across this thing.
It's amazing, and we'll get to why they may have, for lack of a better term, covered up this tragedy. But so tell us about the Cap Arcona, the ship that really is the main character of this book, and in its heyday, this was the life of luxury, right?
Yeah, no question. So Larry and I talked on the phone, and this guy's done his homework. I'll tell you right here. Philadelphia's lucky to have a muckraker like him. So I was nervous when you were telling me all about my book. I was thinking, oh, did I make a mistake? But so the Cap Arcona, named for Cape Arcona, which is a cape on the southern Baltic coast, northern Germany, Germany's only major cape. It was launched in 1927, and she was a beauty. She was built to be the Titanic. Blum & Voss, the great German shipbuilding company, which is still in business, and Hamburg, South America, or Hamburg Sud, S-U-D, they're still in business. They wanted to make their own version of the Titanic. They even copied the design, and she looked just like the Titanic, except she had 3 funnels instead of 4. You know, the 7-course dinners, the grand ballroom, the chandelier, the big stairs. She looked like the Titanic, and all the world's main actors and actresses and European monarchs all sailed on her. She would be equivalent to like the Queen Mary 2 or something today, in a luxury ocean liner in size, opulence, speed, engineering. And she was called the Queen of the South Atlantic, a floating palace. She made over 90-some voyages. Her typical itinerary was she went to South America. Germans at that time in the 20s and 30s were infatuated with South America. So Rio, Buenos Aires, Uruguay. They even had a tango band on board, and there were songs. There was a tango song called the Cap Arcona Tango. So she was one heck of a ship. So what I decided, since there's a lot of books on World War II and a lot of books on the Holocaust, I decided to make the ship the protagonist, if you will, of, you know, the main character, and follow her life, which was an extraordinary life with 100 plot twists and turns, and ending up as potentially the world's worst maritime disaster and the final tragedy of World War II and the Holocaust.
Well, let's jump forward to in the early 40s. The war is thankfully not going so well for the Nazis. The ship is by now sort of in cobwebs. And you have this reporting about Hitler and Goebbels coming up with this cockamamie idea. And tell us about their fixation. I mean, this is stranger than fiction.
Yeah,
their
really
fixation on movies and how they were going to use this ship to make a movie.
So, when September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invades Poland and World War II starts, a lot of transport ships, even ocean liners, the Germans, the British, they put guns on them. They continued to sail, but were fighting ships. Hitler loved this ship, this replica of the Titanic. That's where the name comes. He referred to it as the Nazi Titanic, he and Joseph Goebbels and others. So he didn't want to lose his Titanic. So what he does is he puts it in the Baltic coast, on the Polish coast, because the Germans had taken over Poland, near present-day Gdynia and Gdansk. And the town was renamed by the Germans Gottenhofen. So she sits on the Polish coast, rusting. They took the fancy paint off to kind of make her, less conspicuous. And she's a floating naval platform at the time. So what happens in 1942, there's a memoranda from Goebbels, and he's summoned by the Fuhrer. And in a rare moment of lucidity, Hitler says to Goebbels, we may lose this thing. This war is turning. Remember, the battle for Britain doesn't go as planned. The Air Force, the RAF, those few, as Churchill would say, pilots, Operation Barbarossa, and the invasion of the Soviet Union doesn't go well. They're kicked out of, even Rommel was kicked out of North Africa. So then the beginning of the end seems to be at hand. So Hitler tells Goebbels, we've got to do something big, pull a rabbit out of a hat. What I want you to do is come up with some propaganda play that's so diabolical, so larger than life, it's going to change the complexion of the war. We need to make the world hate the Allies and love us. This is how delusional. So Goebbels says, what is it you want me to do? And Hitler says, I have no idea, but you've got to come up with some new propaganda front. So here's what the two of them did. They loved movies. In fact, Hitler and Goebbels considered themselves connoisseurs of fine film. They thought they were Germany's Siskel and Ebert, okay? And it was not uncommon for them, from the records from the Nazi, from the Reich headquarters, they on a weekend would watch 3 Hollywood blockbusters back to back to back with translators in their ear. And then after each film, they would debate the cinematography, the script, the directing. They thought they were, well, what happens, Goebbels writes, one day they were watching a film and the film left them so emotionally drained. Goebbels doesn't write what the film was. Maybe, part of Goebbels' diary was lost at the end of the war. Much of it was saved, thank goodness, but we've lost several pages. I spent probably 6 months trying to find out what the film was because it was driving me. I couldn't sleep, but he doesn't say. So we don't know what the film was, but we know one film left them so emotionally drained that at the end of the movie, they couldn't debate the cinematography. They just sat there and watched the credits roll. I mean, after you watch Schindler's List, right? Or Saving Private Ryan, right? Or Frozen, you're so emotionally drained that you can't do anything. And while they're watching the script, Goebbels writes, that's when it happened. What they realized was all the directors, cinematographers, actors, scriptwriters were all Jewish. And Goebbels wrote that he and Hitler kicked over every chair in the viewing room. And that's when Hitler had the idea, that's it. We're going to make a Hollywood film better than Jewish Hollywood. Goebbels is assigned to create Hollywood on the Rhine, Babelsberg. And Hitler says, we're going to show Jewish Hollywood that the Aryans make better films. And Goebbels, you're going to make the world's most diabolical propaganda film. But the problem was, Goebbels made these movies like Jude Seuss, Seuss the Jew, or Der Vigor Jude, the Eternal Jew. Every one of Goebbels' movies was sophomoric, ham-fisted. I mean, they all had the same plot, an idyllic German Hamlet. Then a Jewish guy moves in and he's like Dracula and everything goes wrong. And the people rise up with pitchforks and drive him out. Everybody lives happily ever after.
That reminds me, don't you report that they hated Casablanca because
That's
it was actually good propaganda?
That's it. So Hitler and Goebbels loved these movies. The movie they hated the most, Larry, you're right, is Casablanca. They hated that movie. Here's why. Because as Hitler and Goebbels noted, it's basically an action drama romance hybrid, but it's also an anti-Nazi propaganda film. But you don't realize it because it's so well done with a great cast, great directing, great. So what they did is Hitler and Goebbels loved Gone with the Wind. They loved King Kong and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They loved all those movies. I know, and this is from the file that you can't make this stuff up, but they hated Casablanca. So Hitler tells Goebbels, I don't want you to make a ham-fisted propaganda film. I want you to make an action drama romance hybrid so people don't know about the propaganda, but you're gonna fill it with pro-Nazi, anti-Ally propaganda. And at the same time they came up with this big idea, there was a Nazi scriptwriter. His name was Bratt, B-R-A-T-T. And long before James Cameron, he was working on a movie, The Titanic. So Hitler and Goebbels say, that's it. People are, even today, everybody is 1,000 years from now, Larry, people will have a morbid fascination with the Titanic. So Hitler and Goebbels say, let's make the Titanic, but we'll make a Nazi version of the Titanic. And we have a star. We have a replica, life-size replica of the ship sitting on the Polish coast. So they repainted her. They put the Persian carpets, the chandeliers, the silver, and they spared no expense. You know, the Cecil B. DeMille-esque cast of thousands, right? They reassigned units of the Wehrmacht, the army, and the Kriegsmarine, the Navy, to be extras. And they're going to make this huge action drama romance propaganda film about the Titanic. So that's the crazy idea.
It's unbelievable. And then they hire this director, Herbert Selpin, I think his name is.
Selpin, yeah. He pronounced Selpin. Yeah.
And he meets a uniquely Nazi fate.
Yeah.
Tell us about poor Herbert quickly.
So they hire the most handsome matinee actors, the most beautiful models, the best carpenters to make sets. They want to film it outside, and they want to sink the ship at night. So but the problem is, of course, all of Germany is under a mandatory blackout because of Allied bombing. So they get an exception to light it up with these big ballyhoo lights, and the set gets bombed. One of the lead actresses gets pregnant from one of the sailors. The sailors get drunk and wreck. Everything's going wrong. The only thing they can't find, they have a ship, they have everything, but they don't have a director. And Goebbels writes that they realized all of Germany's great directors are in the concentration camps. So they find this Herbert Selpin guy, and in some ways he's an unlikely person, Larry, to direct this, because he's not a loyal Nazi. But in other ways, he's the perfect pick because he makes action, drama, romance hybrids. I went back and watched a Selpin film, S-E-L-P-I-N. I watched, I think, 2 Selpin films, and they were basically Indiana Jones. Great action, drama, romance about a dashing professor, and aren't they all, who goes to Africa, fights the locals, finds the treasure, gets the girl. So, I mean, that's Selpin's movie, so it's perfect. The problem is Selpin is so angry with the Nazis for micromanaging because he's the brilliant artsy director. And he shows up on set one day drunk and everything's going wrong. He's behind schedule, over budget. Hitler's breathing down Goebbels' neck. Goebbels is breathing down his neck. Selpin blows up and curses the Nazis, Hitler, Goebbels. You know, and I know, everyone knows the SS is everywhere. They grab him, summon him to Berlin, and hang him. They kill the director. Goebbels has a tough time then finding another director willing to finish the movie. They find some B movie guy named Werner Klingner. He was the type who would make like Godzilla type things, right? You know, and he finishes the movie.
But the movie is actually, when it never comes out because someone subverted it, right? And it becomes an anti-Nazi theme. So that experiment never happens. Of course, never. The dream, Hitler's dream of this filmic propaganda never comes to pass. So let's go forward a bit, because what happens at the end in the last week of the war is one of the most tragic things I've read, and it's very emotional to read. You know, I'm laughing at the images of Goebbels and Hitler in the movie theater, and then you bring us to this culmination, and it really is the most tragic thing I've experienced. Tell us and it was through a confluence of events that these concentration camp survivors who had already survived so much end up on this ship.
Yeah. So you're right, Larry. It was easily the most difficult book. All the other 40-some books put together were not as difficult, cumulative as this book. And I'm someone that doesn't sleep a whole lot, as you can probably tell. And I do a lot of my writing all night long. So once the fam is asleep, I'll go into my office and, you know, it's like Count Dracula in there all night long writing, hammering out another book or article or something. But I would say to my family, look, good night, everybody. You know, I got to go into the office. And I had hundreds of pages of these just now declassified documents. So kind of like, you know, in the detective movies, they always, all the detectives put on the wall all the pictures and they're connecting them with line. So they were all haphazardly thrown in this classified box. Think about the end of World War II, Larry. Thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dog tags, reports, documents, pistols, helmets. I mean, World War II, and it's all shuttled back to the National Archives, boxed up and put in the basement. So I had my floor of my office at the university was a crime scene for weeks and weeks. Students weren't allowed in. We did all my office hours out in the hallway because I had to align everything chronologically by topic and make sense of this. But I would go in at night and tell the family, look, I'm doing another all-nighter. I'd come home in an hour and they would say, what's the matter? And I would say, I can't. It's just too difficult. And after an hour, I just couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't read anymore. But I was trying to hustle this. And my publisher knows that I drove them nuts trying to push to get this out. Because with every passing day, we're losing that generation. And I couldn't help but to think that if there's survivors from this ship or loved ones or rescuers, and if this book comes out after they're gone. So I worked, 15 hours a day, weekends, nights, we hustled it out. So what happens is the winter and spring of 1945, to your question, Larry, is one of the world's worst moments. Hitler issues his infamous liquidation decree. He wants all camps, all records, anybody in them destroyed. He knows it's over. So we don't know who knows how many countless thousands of people were killed. But then Heinrich Himmler enters our narrative. Himmler sends this cryptic, vague message to all the concentration camp commandants. If your camp is not yet liberated or liquidated, I don't want the prisoners to fall into Allied hands. Now, what does he mean? Does it mean save them, move them, kill them? He wasn't clear. He couldn't be clear because if Hitler found out what Himmler was up to, he would be upset. And ultimately from the bunker, Hitler does find out what Himmler's up to and sends two Luftwaffe, two pilots to assassinate him. But then Himmler gets caught and kills himself. But so Himmler then sends his minions to meet with the concentration camp commandants saying, here's the deal. We want you to move all of your prisoners to Hamburg. In Hamburg, which is in north central Germany near the Baltic, there's a large concentration camp, KZ Neuengamme, Neuengamme. It's a brick-making concentration camp, massive. So thousands and thousands of concentration camp prisoners, survivors from all around are sent to Hamburg by train, cattle cars, by foot, and barges. And there they pile everybody up. What is Himmler up to? We don't know. Here's what he's up to. He then orders all of them to march the final something like 60 kilometers to the Baltic. He wants them to get on a ship. And Himmler wants to save thousands of Holocaust survivors because he wants to trade them. He wants to offer an exchange, their lives for his life. He also wants to offer thousands of Holocaust survivors in a conditional quid pro quo surrender on the Western Front. What Himmler and most Nazis are worried about is the Red Army, because they're just mass murdering everybody. So if we can get a surrender coming from the east, we can get a surrender with the Americans and Canadians, British, we could then turn and try to stop the Red Army. So Himmler wants everybody on a ship. He's going to board the ship. Presumably, he's either going to sail to London or they're going to meet in Copenhagen. We're not sure, because he ends up getting caught and killing himself. The ship that Himmler requests, there is only one ship, the Nazi Titanic. Everybody, the pride of the Third Reich. So this massive ship sets sail, and she goes to Neustadt, Neustadt, New City, at Lübeck Bay. And she's so big, Larry, that she can't anchor. She can't go to the port. She has to drop anchor 3 kilometers out. And in late April and early May, thousands and thousands of survivors are piling up on the port, and then they're loading them all on the ship. But nobody knows why, when, what's happening. The Nazis at the port, the commanders, the prisoners, the captain of the ship, nobody knows what's going on. Some think they're being freed. Some think it's going to be a floating concentration camp. The captain has all kinds of worries, but nobody knows for sure.
And then the British Royal Air Force mistakenly bombs the ship.
Correct. So there's 2 Nazis in North Germany. The head politician, he would be like a mayor or governor. His name was Karl Kaufmann, with a K and a K. And the head Gestapo is Count George von Basewitz-Behr, B-E-H-R, like the paint. And those 2 are responsible for this. They don't know what the heck's going on, but they hear that Hitler killed himself, Eva Braun's dead, Goebbels kills himself, Himmler's on the run and then kills himself, Hermann Goering's on the run and gets caught. It's chaos. And they have thousands of survivors on this giant ship. They have thousands at the port. All of the German Empire is overrun except the Baltic coast. They don't know what to do. So here's the plan they concoct. Let's put everybody on the ship. Let's load it with fuel. And when we're forced to surrender or when we're overrun, let's blow it up and sink it. That'll be one final FU to the world. We will deny the Allies from getting our beloved pride of the Third Reich, the Nazi Titanic. We'd rather scuttle it than to think that it would be used. Same way Goebbels killed his 6 kids, right? Rather than them living in a world without Hitler. And they said that the world will forget the Titanic because so many times more people will die on the Nazi Titanic. So right when they're ready to blow it up, the British 6th Commando, along with the Scottish unit, the tank unit, come racing into the Baltic, led by General Mills Roberts. That's the guy's name I gave you. I found the letter at the beginning. They make quick work of the Nazis. It's not the Wehrmacht, the Nazi army. It's the Volkssturm. This is a couple of old men and a couple of young boys with antiquated guns. So they're wiped out right away. Some of the young Hitler Youth and some of the naval cadets at the port run away. Everybody else gets killed or taken prisoner. So the British overrun the port. And when they're there at the coast, the thousands of survivors at the coast are saying, oh my gosh, that ship out there is filled with thousands of people. And every day they take hundreds and hundreds more. And every day they throw dozens of dead bodies off and bring hundreds back. So right when the British are ready to go out to rescue, they hear a deafening roar. And they look up in the air and the sky blackens. 6 squadrons of bombers, 6 squadrons of bombers. These are Typhoon bombers. They fly into the Baltic. They see, these are RAF, Royal Air Force, British, and they all target the Nazi Titanic and they blow the ship out of the water, killing thousands and thousands of people. Each Typhoon bomber is armed with, they're not a giant bomber like if you've seen a B-24, B-17, or the British Lancaster, but they're not a small fighter like an American P-51 Mustang or British Spitfire, if there's any World War II nerds out there. They're mid-size. They can fight and bomb, so it's mid-sized. So they have twin 20s, like large machine guns on the wings, and they're each carrying a 500-pound bomb and a 60-pound rocket. So they fire rockets, drop the bombs, kill everybody, and almost everybody in the ship. Ship sinks. People were in the water. Now, the Baltic is 42 degrees Fahrenheit in May. So having survived the Holocaust, a death march, days on the ship, no food, no water, most people perish immediately of hypothermia or just drown because they're too weak. with the ship starting to sink and roll, the suction pulls others underneath the ship. Those that are holding on to wood or something, the typhoons turn around and strafe with their machine guns the people in the water. Then they race down the port, and there's thousands of people at the port going like this with striped pajamas, and they strafe the people at the port. One pilot, Alan Weisse, W-Y-S-E, his report was in the box, as they all were, and I read his report. He said that he was sawing, S-A-W, like a saw, sawing torsos in half with his machine guns. And Weisse even said, then I strafed and killed all the chaps in the water. He said, but that's war. Somebody's got to do it. And then the planes all fly back to liberated airspace, and the end of the war is around the corner.
Why did and by the way, folks, anyone who, we're going to get to your questions, so put them either in the chat or the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. But why did, I mean, first of all, these were kids who were flying these planes of the British Air Force, and there actually is a rationale as to why they did this. In retrospect, it's this horrible, it is this horrible tragedy that is unbelievable to even think of. But you also kind of, I kind of, in the end, understand, because they were afraid of that the Nazis were escaping, right?
Right. So I hit the British hard for what they did, but I don't render a judgment like a court case. I want the readers to come up with the answer. And at the end in the appendix, I provide some facts and let the readers figure it out. What it was almost a perfect storm, Larry, in that one, there were rumors that the Nazis were going to try to flee. And we know this. This has been substantiated by countless sources, books, scholars, museums. And one plan was they would go to Norway, which was still under Nazi control, and they would make a final redoubt, one last stand. And therefore, they could use the geographic isolation of Norway. They could use the cold weather, the mountains, the deep fjords to dig in for one last stand. So that, and then when the war ended, guess what? We found U-boats, submarines in the fjords in Norway. So there was some legitimacy to this plan. So what the bombers were doing is they were going all along the German and Polish coast, and they were hitting everybody, every ship, so that the Germans couldn't flee. They just hit Kiel 2 days before. And there was a Frenchman, he was with the Freed French Forces. He was flying that day. His name was Pierre Klosterman. I think he's one of the few that knew exactly what he was doing. But he wrote, I killed everybody on the ship, everybody at the port. I fired everything I had, and I didn't give a damn. He said, because everyone I knew and loved in Paris was killed. My country was overrun. This war is going on long enough. 2 days before, he was bombing the port at Kiel, and his friends flying on either wing were blown out of the sky. And his plane was filled with holes when he flew in that day. He even said my tail, my plane, he said I could have kicked a football through the hole, or we would say soccer ball. So the British were running out of pilots, to your question, Larry. So what they did is they got 18, 19-year-old boys with an expedited couple of days of training, and they stuck them in the cockpit. The commander of the 6 squadrons, the old man of the group, Johnny Baldwin, was 23. So these are young boys. It was pouring. I'm not excusing the British. It was pouring rain. It was cloudy. They couldn't see. So the bombers had to drop down. In fact, it was so bad that when they went to hit in the morning, they had to return to their base and refuel. The weather was too bad. They come back at 14:30 or 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. They have to drop very low out of the clouds to hit the ship. If you're a slow-flying bomber, you don't want to be low because you're subject to anti-aircraft guns. So they fired everything they had. Of course, they had to know it was an ocean liner, not a warship. But the ship's low in the water, which means it's full of fuel and full of people.
Right.
So that's what, and now we can't excuse what they did at the port, because anybody could recognize a skeleton with a striped, pajama on, as opposed to naval sailors or something. And they and it's the bloodiest hour of the Holocaust, and one of the world's worst maritime disasters, and the world's worst instance probably of friendly fire.
And how many? We're getting some questions in the chat. How many people perished?
Okay.
There's a range there, right?
Yes, there is. First off, there's no firm number, and there's no agreed upon number, and there's little that's done on this. I try to estimate based on all available records. Here's what I estimate. As many as 10,000 people, survivors, died on the death march to the coast. So maybe 10,000 died on that death march. The Nazis ran them at a merciless rate. If you tripped, had to go to the bathroom, couldn't keep up, they just killed you because they knew the Allies were coming. They were scared to death. Many of them, when they got to the port, changed out of the uniform, put on civilian clothes, and just ran. Hundreds died in a train at the coast because the Nazis never unlocked the cattle cars and just left people in there for days until they died. The guess is on the ship anywhere from 4,500 to 7,500. I know that's quite a range, but we can't narrow it down beyond that because every hour or two they bring another several hundred people out to the ship, and then they bring another 100 dead back. Then 500 out, 100 dead back, bring 600 out, throw 50 overboard, and this was going on for days. So my guess is 4,500 to 7,500 died on the ship. There were 3 other ships next to it at anchor, the Deutschland, the Aten, and the Teelbeck. 2 of those 3 were hit and destroyed, and my guess is 4,000 died on those. My guess is another 4,000 or 5,000 at the port. So start doing the math, anywhere from 4,500 to 7,500 on the ship, and you're talking, 25,000 plus in this whole ordeal. So it's unimaginable, yeah.
What was the date of the attack, someone asks?
May 3rd, 1945 at 2:30 p.m. So we're just D- from VE Day when the surrender occurred. And the morning of May 3rd, the Germans surrendered Lübeck Bay, Neustadt, and the port. So it had just been surrendered, and hours later, the ship was blown up.
And we've had a couple questions about survivors. You found some survivors and tell a couple of really moving stories. Can you pick one? Like I won't pronounce the name correctly, Bogdan
Zakowiak. Bogdan Zakowiak. There were 4 all the stories and Larry, we're probably of the same mind here. We've heard countless Holocaust survivor stories, but every one is unique and every one is equally as powerful. It's not something you ever get used to. But all the stories were remarkable. But Bogdan Zakowiak, Francis Akos, A-K-O-S, and the Jakubowicz brothers, Berek and Jozek, were the ones that really left me. The Jakubowicz brothers were in a deep hole in the ship, a hold, with hundreds of other people. A massive gaping hole is torn in the ship. It fills with freezing cold water. Everybody in there has been in there for days. They all drowned or die immediately. And then it's filling up. It's going up to the roof. Well, the hatches are sealed. So it's only a matter of seconds or minutes before you run out of air. Right when they're ready to die, some brave survivors on the top decks, get this, despite being under attack and explosions and the ship rolling over, and despite surviving the Holocaust, the death march and days, they go below decks. And the 2 Jakubowicz brothers said the hatch pops open right as they're ready to drown. Hands come down and pull the 2 brothers who are teenagers out. They're running through the ship. It's like the Poseidon adventure. They got to swim. They got to get to the top to get to the bottom to get to the top because it's rolling over. They're going, parts of it are on fire, parts of it are underwater. Ultimately, fire kills all the rescuers. The 2 of them break a air duct, climb out. One stays on the ship, Jozek, because he can't swim. Berek goes in the water. In the water is also Bogdan Zakowiak and Francis Akos. Jakubowicz, Berek, is pulled out of the water by a German fisherman who will never tell him his name because he's so afraid of the Nazis. He pulls a couple people out of the water, takes them to a bakery. There's no food. They're naked and freezing, but they wrap up in the burlap sacks and light the ovens in the bakery to stay warm. I tried to find out this guy's name so that we might list him as a righteous Gentile in Yad Vashem, but nobody knows his name. Francis Akos and Bogdan Zakowiak make it ashore, and there's some Hitler Youth and naval cadets that are going to kill them. These young boys, with their last ammunition, their last breath of air on this planet. Here comes General Mills Roberts and the 6th Commando. These Hitler Youth and naval cadets, rather than surrender, rather than fight back against your enemy, rather than run to save your life, rather than give aid to these survivors that are lying at your feet, they start machine gunning and bashing in skulls with the butts of their gun. General Mills Roberts says, it was the only time in my long career in uniform I was neither an officer nor a gentleman. He said, no prisoners, tear them limb from limb. And they rescued these folks. The Jakubowicz brothers end up moving north of Boston. They live long lives, they marry. I talked to Barrick's wife a couple of years ago on the phone, she was still alive. Francis Akos, who was he was a violinist in the Budapest Jewish Philharmonic. He ends up moving to Chicago, and I talked to him in Chicago and his daughter. He passed about 3 years ago. He ends up becoming, get this, Larry, principal first chair violinist of the Chicago Philharmonic and concertmaster. So the stories are just shocking. So I estimate, and again, it's an estimate, that somewhere between 250 and 350 people survived this just carnage. So
amazing and incredibly moving. Larry writes here, a story I never heard. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. But this was not the first time the Allies hit a ship with survivors. Do you know about the Jews of Crete who were being transported and their ship was torpedoed and they all perished? By the way, can you also give all the information about the book again and where to purchase it?
Yes and yes. So I've done some work on the DPs, the displaced persons who were in Crete and Cyprus and elsewhere. And, you know, many were trying to make it to Palestine, Transjordan. And the British policy was, so it wasn't just that one ship. The British policy was to ram these craft and tow them or pull them back to Cyprus, you know, Crete, wherever, to a DP camp. The British weren't allowing people to go to Palestine. Now, if you survive the Holocaust and DP camps, you don't want to go back to Germany or Poland. I get that. But that was the British policy. It was Harry Truman who made the British stand down and allow people to get to Palestine as an early idea for a homeland, which would become, of course, Israel on May 14th, 1948 at 6:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, that happened. So it wasn't just that one incident, Larry. There were others where the British Navy was ramming ships and denying people from getting there. And those Jews that did make it to Palestine, some were attacked, some were arrested, some were beaten, some worse. The Holocaust doesn't end. The book's name is The Nazi Titanic, and it's available, you know, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, you know, anywhere books are sold. Yeah. And my name's real easy to remember, Dr. Watson, like elementary, Robert Watson. So
a couple of people have written in that their relatives were on the ship. Mitchell Gardner says, my father, Moishe Taus, and his good friend Herschel Baths were on this ship.
Oh my gosh.
Are there any records of others who survived? And Stacy Friedman also writes that her Zeta was on the ship.
Oh my gosh.
And a survivor of the Cap Arcona, which is
okay.
Fascinating. And you may want to, if I know Robert, he probably wants to speak to you guys, because that's fascinating to me that we'd have some connection to some survivors. Yeah. As you said, there might only be a couple hundred survivors, right?
250 to 350. If I had to put money on it, I'd say 250 to 300. That's it. So to those three folks, first off, thank you for viewing and thank you for writing the questions, and I can't imagine the emotions you're feeling. Let me give you my email. It's really easy. Every university, it's first initial, last name at theuniversity.edu. So it's rwatson@lynn, LYNN.edu. Real easy. Or if you don't remember it, just go to Lynn's website and just type in Dr. Watson, and it's easy to find. Send me an email and I'll let you know what I know. We found a couple survivors, Larry. First off, the question is, why didn't folks talk about it? Well, what I always tell my students on campus is, I want you to think about the worst thing that's ever happened to you and multiply it by 100 and now tell it to a stranger. Of course, you're not going to do it. No one was recording oral histories until Elie Wiesel published Night, 1962-ish. When that came out, people felt that they had of responsibility, or that it was okay to tape this. So first thing I did was I called Yad Vashem, I called the U.S. Holocaust Museum, all these places, and said, my gosh, we have to find these stories. The problem is this, you know, we have thousands and thousands of taped oral histories. Not all of them are digitized yet. They're still working their way through them. So remember, if it's not digitized, it doesn't exist. If a tree falls in the woods and no scholar's there to document it, it doesn't make a sound. So I got the folks with the Spielberg, with the University of Southern California, with the U.S. Holocaust Museum. What they did is they found 5 people that actually taped their Shoah interviews about the ship, but they were still reel to reel. So then they digitized them, and now they're available publicly, and they sent them to me. We also found someone in Israel, someone in Australia. We found someone in Buffalo. I got a phone call from a young guy who was super excited. He goes, oh my gosh, I just read your book. My grandpa is on page, I don't know, 210 or something. And I said, oh my gosh, you know, let's talk. He said, he's in Buffalo. I said, oh my goodness. So I got a friend of mine, her name is Deborah Oppenheimer. She's an Academy Award-winning filmmaker from Hollywood. If anybody's seen the movie on the Kinder Transport, let me plug her film, Into the Arms of Strangers. Oh, yeah. It's a tearjerker. It's magnificent. Won the Academy Award 2001. Deborah's also on the board of the U.S. Holocaust Museum. So she flew right away to Buffalo, and we taped the story and added it to the Shoah collection. So I was at, one of the speeches I gave was at Penn in your wonderful city. And at the end of my speech at Penn, a distinguished older woman raises her hand, and she says, my late husband was on that ship. And I said, you know, ma'am, please hang around after my speech and we'll talk. And we talked for a minute, and then she was ready to go. But what she told me, it was clear that her husband was on the ship, because she knew things that I think only I knew, and anybody today that's since gone through the records would know, you would know from reading the book. So yeah, we found a couple of people and a couple of accounts. So yeah.
It's fascinating. I would be remiss, Robert, if I didn't mention that, and you've mentioned Harry Truman a couple of times, that you and I share a political hero, which is Harry Truman. Why is that? Why are you drawn to, and I should say you sit on the Truman Foundation board and conducted the Truman Symposium with his staff at the Truman Little White House in Key West, where you and I have both spent time. Why is he your guy?
Larry, as soon as you told me that on the phone, I smiled ear to ear, and I've been looking forward to this for many reasons, but one, it's always nice to talk to another Truman aficionado. But Harry's always been my guy. First off, he's the last American president to lack a college degree. And much like a Ben Franklin or a Abe Lincoln or an Alexander Hamilton, he came from nothing, but he was a voracious reader and a self-made man. Secondly, Truman was raised in a bitterly racist and anti-Semitic household, but he violated our cardinal rule that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Truman becomes the great champion for human rights and for Israel. And it would take me an hour and a half to tell you all that he did for Israel, but the short end of it is Truman manages to get a $100 million loan guarantee for the fledgling state of Israel, which at the end of World War II, we're broke and we're isolationist and no one gives a darn. It was opposed in the South. Both parties opposed it. The State Department opposed it. The British opposed it. And yet Truman fought for it. Over 390,000 refugees from the Holocaust were brought into the United States by Harry Truman when the State Department and the public wanted zero. And I got to interview one of his senior aides who told me, he said, I'm going to tell you a story that's going to make your head spin. And I'm going to tell you a story. Truman should have been impeached, even though he loved Harry and cried when I interviewed him for the Truman Library. I taped all the living aides to Harry Truman over a multiple year period. So here you go. We had immigration quotas. And for example, from Germany, we only filled the immigration quota 1 out of the 12 years that Hitler and FDR were in power. We could have brought Jews in. So with immigration quotas, Truman's limited on what he can do. Folks in the DP camps who won't go back to Germany or Poland or Russia, they're stateless. So we can't bring them in under Poland's immigration quota. We can't bring them in at all because they don't have a state because they're in a DP camp. So Truman tells the senior aide and a couple others, and I then called the library and they dug up all the documents for me. He says that Truman would tell them, let's say Greece had an immigration quota of 1,000 and only 500 Greeks came in. Truman would say, I heard there's 500 Jewish Greeks in Cyprus, bring them in. I mean, he was fudging the documents. This is remarkable. Then there's another, I'll give you one more, I could give 1,000, but there's a wonderful exchange with the State Department. Truman floats that $100 million loan guarantee. And of course, the Israeli elite, Ben-Gurion, Avi Eban, Weizmann, they're using some of it to buy weapons, right? Because multiple countries attack Israel right away in 48 and 49. And most of the world will neither sell to nor buy from. They're boycotting Israel. Truman gives Israel an early version of most favored nation so that he can help them. So the State Department says to Truman, I don't know if you know this or not, but the Israeli leaders are using that 100 million to buy weaponry, planes from Eastern Europe. This is all against the protocol. It's all against the agreement. And Truman says, you're right. This is horrible. This is in violation of everything we set up. It's so important. I'm taking it out of the State Department's hands. I'm going to handle it myself. Then what he does is he contacts Ben-Gurion and Avi Eban, and he says, I told him about the memo, and he said, I put in a safe and locked it. I can't remember the combo. In other words, wink, wink, use the money as you need. He was risking his presidency. He was running interference. His best friend, Eddie Jacobson, was Jewish. The great Dr. Sam Rosenman was Truman's buddy and speechwriter. It's remarkable that this man, an uneducated, failed haberdasher and farmer from rural Missouri, who rose to the lofty ranks of captain during World War I, Battery D of the Missouri Artillery, would become the great champion of the global Jewish diaspora. How do you not like that story, and how do you not like that guy?
Well, that's a great series of anecdotes. You also told me an anecdote that one of his aides told you years later about him about him refusing to ask donors for a $5,000 contribution. What politician will not ask for money?
That was the last time that ever happened, Larry. So what I did when I interviewed all the aides to Truman, I wanted to make my contribution to my teaspoon of contribution to history in the Truman Library. I wanted to make the interviews fun and provocative. I say, what was his favorite joke? Did you ever see him laugh? Did you ever see him cry? What did he play on the piano? Did it ever make you angry? And one of the times they said, in 1948, he was going to lose to Dewey. By the way, he used to call Dewey the little man on top of the wedding cake. Didn't he look like him with the hat and the little stash? He also used to say about Dewey, this is cute. I guess I'm aging our audience here, or maybe myself, but Truman used to say, no one's going to vote for Dewey because he looks like the bad guy in all the silent movies that tied the girl on the train tracks, right? So he had a great sense of humor. So he's going to lose to Dewey, and his aides are angry because Truman won't go to a $5,000 fundraiser. So these two aides tell me that they're telling Truman, look, you don't understand, the Democratic Party's going to get whooped in 48. They lost 50-some seats in the 46 midterm, and it was all blamed on Truman. Your legacy is going to be mud. I mean, you've got to start raising money. You're going to lose big and everything else. So Truman won't go, and they're saying, Mr. President, you don't understand. This is what they told me, the two aides. They said, Truman says to them, no, you don't understand, because it's not $5,000. If I win, it's 5,000 IOUs, and I'm not for sale, and this office isn't for sale. And he didn't go. I mean, it's almost quaint. It's like Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith goes to, but he did it. And you know what? He won in 48. So you can do the right thing and win. And he did the right thing for Israel and Jewish immigration and not taking blood money. And he still won. It can be done. I don't know that it's happened since then.
I have a clip somewhere of him speaking to a joint session of Congress during when the steelworkers were
Steel strike.
Going on strike, and he announces that I am conscripting them into military service, and within minutes, someone passes him a piece of paper, and he reads to the Congress, "I'm pleased to announce that the strike is settled."
Yeah, Harry Truman was as honest as the day is long. And, if you talk to any historian, you and I, we all read all the memoirs written by presidents. We were denied one from Lincoln, one from George Washington, Kennedy, FDR, they would have been the best. But all historians are in agreement that there's two presidential memoirs you've got to read, Grant and Truman. A lot of the rest, honestly, it's either a 600-word victory lap or ghost written. But Truman's and Grant's are spectacular. And I think the reason why is they were both so honest that they even tell you the mistakes they made.
Yeah.
They tell you when they were afraid, when they screwed up, who they liked, who they didn't. And that kind of honesty it's a bygone era. One real quick thing on that note. One of the aides, when I asked, did Harry ever make you laugh or cry or angry or, all these fun things? What was his favorite joke? Did he like dirty jokes? I mean, I asked everything. One of them told me, he said, yeah, he made me angry. He made a mistake. And in a meeting, he announced, I'm going to tell the public because I made a mistake. And they said, Mr. President, no one knows. And he said, no, I made a mistake. I have to tell him. They said, well, blame it on someone. He said, no, buck stops here. He insisted on telling people that he made a mistake. And the aide said, we were furious with him because we were already unpopular. But that's the guy. And I'm happy to say that Abba Eban considered Truman to be like a father. And he wrote a wonderful letter to the Truman Library. And I got a chance to hold the letter with gloves and read it. And Dr. Chaim Weizmann, the great Zionist leader, chemist, and world-class intellectual, considered Harry to be a brother. What an unlikely relationship, both ways. Weizmann and Eban are two of the truly classic intellectuals of the 20th century, and Harry was the backwoods farmer, but they really connected on a profound level. And I've written that I think that these guys realized that Harry was filled with substance, and he understood that he needed to do the right thing. And for him, it was not a political equation with pollsters. It was simply, this is the right thing to do. And I know that sounds corny and naive of me, and I can't quantify it, and I can't put a citation down. But after spending 30 years as a professor reading this and interviewing all of his aides, I read all the letters exchanged between Weizmann and Truman and Eban and Truman and Ben-Gurion. I really believe Harry just thought it was the right thing to do, and so be it, I'm doing it. And that's just inspiring. I take great, especially in difficult times like today and with ugly partisanship and so much else that goes on, in our politics always. This is one of those stories that we can all latch on to and try to model.
That's a great place to end it, Robert. I could talk to you about Harry Truman for hours, but
when I come to Philadelphia, we'll have a cup of coffee, Larry.
We'll do it. But with Nazi Titanic, you have really contributed something to the zeitgeist. And if you haven't read this book, please do, because you talk about never forgetting. I never knew.
Me neither.
So now I'll never forget. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And for the families who had loved ones on the ship, please feel free to email me, Esther and Jennifer and everyone. Thank you. And if folks have a pressing question, Larry, pass it on to Esther and you can email me and I'd be happy to answer them by email. Okay? Thank you. And keep up the good work at the memorial.
Thank you. Thanks to you, Larry, as well. We really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you.